Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the Chamber's Skills Series presentation, Professional Fluency. This session will be recorded and available to you on our Chamber website in the event you wanted to go back for a refresher or share it with a colleague. So we're grateful to provide this offering free of charge because of the generosity of our sponsor, Lake Superior College. And speaking today on behalf of our sponsor is Daniel Fanning, the Vice President of Institutional Advancement and Government Relations at Lake Superior College. So Dan, I appreciate you being here today.
Hey Chris, hey everyone, thank you very much. On behalf of Lake Superior College, just want to say thank you to you and everyone at the Chamber for helping put this on and organize it, and thank you for everyone who's attending. We do this every month, and every month it's an honor to talk on behalf of Lake Superior College. This is a big part of our mission, community and education, and the two together. We're just really proud to be part of this. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I was especially proud of this month, because we have one of our own presenting, and you're in for a treat. If you never heard from Kelli before, you are in for a treat. She is one of our many awesome faculty here at Lake Superior College, so we are very, very excited. And without further ado, I'll shut up because I know you want to hear from her, and she is fantastic. So Chris, thank you for having us. We're honored to be part of this, and Kelli, can't wait to hear from you.
You bet. Thanks, Danielle. Well, like Dan said, I'm really excited too to introduce our speaker today, Kelli Hallsten Erickson. Kelli is the Center for Faculty Innovation Coordinator and English faculty at Lake Superior College. This is intended to be an interactive and engaging session. So if you're comfortable, we really encourage you to turn on your video and audio, and we'll go ahead and we'll do some breakout rooms later. So thank you so much for presenting for us today, Kelli, and I will turn it over to you.
All right, terrific. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Friends, thank you so much for joining me today. I am going to share my screen because what would be a presentation without a PowerPoint? So here it comes. There it is. I will start from the beginning because that seems like a good place to start from. I want to thank you again very much for having me today, for taking time out of your day, your lunch period, lunchtime, to spend talking about professional fluency. This is something that is, I think, probably near and dear to all of our hearts. It's something that, a subject that is an ongoing topic of conversation that is continually evolving based on lots of different factors that I'm really interested in having a conversation with you about today. So I chose this PowerPoint theme, not because it has anything to do with professionalism, but because I knew that it was going to be a foggy, yucky day today. I just knew it. So I wanted to choose something that had some sweeping landscapes, because it just seemed like, why not? My name is Kelli Hallsten Erickson. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Center for Faculty Innovation Coordinator at Lake Superior College, and I am also an English instructor. I've been here since 2005, and I have been our Center for Faculty Innovation Coordinator for 12 years. That is basically I'm the person who is in charge of training for faculty for their professional development. So maybe you have professional development trainers at your organizations. That's what I'm doing as part of my role here. In this position, I've had the really good fortune to consider the needs of our faculty for training and best practices in teaching. So this is things like classroom management, learning styles, and since 2014, professionalism. So I've done a lot of study on professionalism, but I want you to know that I deeply value your lived experiences that you bring to this subject. I want to avoid telling you a bunch of stuff that you already know as much as possible, and get ideas and to solutions that you can practically apply to your work today, or maybe tomorrow. Interaction is going to be important. So there's going to be some breakout groups. I do have a couple of polls. I'm going to have a go at launching. And so I'm hoping that we can have some good discussion, and you might feel comfortable doing that. So so we can all have the richest conversation possible. So feel free to unmute anytime and ask questions along the way. I know people say that, and then you're like, did they really mean it? No, I really mean it. Like, just unmute anytime and ask a question. Like right now, you could stop me and say, Kelli, and I'd be like, whoa, you got something already. That's amazing. But anytime, truly. Okay, so I'm gonna launch in. Here are the outcomes for this session. I am not going to read them for you. Overall, I will state that what we're talking about today, professionalism, it's a moving target, like I said earlier, that will evolve based on many factors. Like the obvious example of this is the pandemic, right? That changes our professional behavior. Look at what's happening here. We're on Zoom. I had no idea 15 months ago that this would be how I was going to present to you. Believe me, I'd rather we were all sitting in a room and I was moving around and interacting in that way. But here we are, making it work. Less obvious examples are the very specific experiences individuals bring with them into the workplace that influence the behaviors, their professional behaviors. And some of those things can be positive or negative. Ultimately, we need to communicate expectations for workplaces and implement strategies for teaching these skills. Of course, we also have to practice them ourselves. So my goal here for this session is to reinvigorate the idea of professionalism for all of you, what it means and how it can benefit everyone you work with and for. Okay, so there are lots of behaviors that we might think about when we say professionalism. So I want to get some ideas from you all right away. Okay, so I'm going to launch a poll. Okay, so this in the chat, I'm going to ask you, if you go to menti.com, okay, and I'm going to just stop this share real quick. And I'm going to share my poll and, hopefully it'll work. We'll see what happens here. I'm just going to share the screen, I guess. Interesting. Give me just 1 second here. I'm not sure why this isn't. Oh, I know why. Oh boy. That was a rookie mistake. Okay, here we go.
You have a code for your...
I sure do. It's coming in for you just here. All right. All right. So I'm going to present this. Sorry, it's my first time using this.
That's great.
Code's coming in. Okay. 9010. Wait. Hang on a second.
Got it.
Hang on.
Okay, let's see.
No. Wait. This is not the right one. I'm so sorry, friends. See, this is what happens when you, okay, here we go. This is the one we want. That one's coming in soon though. All right. Okay. This is 21944938. So what is the number one thing that your coworkers or employees, if you're a boss, do that shows their professionalism? So I'm looking for one word, maybe a very short phrase that shows that. Thanks, Chris, for popping that in.
You're welcome.
Ooh. And as this is happening, if you feel like, ooh, that's a good one, that's it, you can repeat that word. And then of course, in the world of the word cloud, it gets bigger the more people use that. Oh yes, I'm seeing some themes. Maybe just another 10 seconds. Ooh, communication's getting bigger and bigger. I love it. You know what's so interesting about that? The communication. I was just reading an article this morning that was talking about professional communication and how critical that is these days. So I'm not surprised communication is going to come up here again as we're talking. Warren Buffett said that a good communication skills will make you worth 50% more. I'm like, I don't know exactly what that means, Warren Buffett, but if you're saying it, I'm believing it. I don't know. So we have preparation, communication seem to be huge. Direct conversations, that's that communication, active listening coming up, vocabulary. I'm seeing some things here that I think we're going to need to keep in mind here as we're moving forward. I'm going to flip back to the presentation. So these are skills that are valued and they're being demonstrated. So these are things that you see your coworkers doing and doing well. So one thing I'm going to be talking about educating about professionalism a lot during this presentation. So one thing that if you're thinking about doing some education on professional skills, one thing you want to consider is what they're doing already and doing well. So this idea of having direct conversations or communication, the question that I think about is this something that's innate? Like, if you think of a person who has really good communication skills, is this something that they just have in them? Or is this something that is learned? And I would suggest that anybody can learn to be a better communicator. But one thing you might want to consider is giving this person kudos for their professionalism and then asking them. Ask them about it. Like, oh my, you're the most wonderful communicator. And like, oh, thanks. And then usually the conversation ends. But if you want to learn about professionalism and how to teach others, you might ask them, how did you learn how to do that? Where'd that come from? And that all of a sudden becomes a much more enriching conversation. And it's a great first step for building camaraderie and getting a sense of how you might teach others. Okay, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think I'd like to take a broader look at professionalism. And to be clear, when I say professionalism, I am talking about soft skills. And that's a term that has its own connotations that aren't necessarily positive. Lots of times I've heard it's for sure vague to say soft skills. So I want to look at a couple of data points that demonstrate the importance of professionalism right now and that help define what we mean when we're talking about it. We started getting at it with that word cloud, but I want to get even more specific. Okay, so first of all, the first bit of data I'm going to bring up is from LinkedIn. They had a 2019 Global Talent Trends report, and they do one of these every year. And I'm going to refer to their 2020 report later, but I'm talking about the 2019 one right now. And one major trend that they noticed of 4 major trends was the need for soft skills, specifically this top 5 list that you see here, which is sort of interesting. Like, I think persuasion, like that's sort of an interesting term. I sort of feel like that kind of means communication in a way, but that's the one that I feel like is a little bit of an outlier on this list, but it's interesting nonetheless. So you might consider these skills and how important they are in your workplace and how well they're being demonstrated by your coworkers and employees. You might also want to consider, this is another thing with professional skills when you're going to talk about this, is how well you demonstrate these skills. And be honest with yourself about that, okay? Be honest. I can tell you that I try to be as adaptable as possible, but I am a woman with a plan, okay? And there have been times when I've been teaching a class or something and I really want to stick to the schedule. Like I just want to get through the material. I have a plan. Let's do this, people. But the students really need me to like slow it down and throw the schedule out the window. And that's hard for me. But it's something that I've been working on. Okay. So think about what you demonstrate in terms of professionalism and what you could work on it. Honest assessment is important. Otherwise, how are we going to grow? Okay, so anyway, LinkedIn's report goes on to note how soft skills influence hiring in general and what makes for a bad hire. And the percentages are kind of bananas. They show that people need to have soft skills if they're going to be successful coming into a job. Okay, jump in anytime if you have any questions or additional thoughts. Okay, another piece of research that I think is particularly compelling comes from the National Association of Colleges and Employers Job Outlook. This is from 2019, their 2019 report again. According to this report, it's very extensive. You can see that there are 4 key competencies for folks who are going to be heading into the workplace, and most are pretty similar to the LinkedIn skills. What's probably most interesting about this is the employer survey they did on major soft skills. In this graph, you're going to see these dark teal bars and then the light blue bars. The dark teal bars indicate how essential the skill is in their workplace, and the light blue bars indicate how proficient the recent graduates coming into their workplaces are with those skills. So I want to draw your attention to the 4 competencies on the right-hand side of the page. These are rated as essential at least 90% of the time by employers, and the discrepancy between that and the proficiencies that their new hires are demonstrating are the greatest. So you can see that teamwork, critical thinking, oral and written communication, and professionalism, work ethic are lacking. I find this to be a little bit shocking. Does anybody have any reaction to this at all that you'd be interested in sharing? I would guess that your silence means that you are also shocked and perhaps not surprised. Is that maybe? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where you're at with that, but maybe it'll come up later. Okay, so I'm gonna just let you sit with this and let's get back to us. We're gonna do another poll and I'm gonna launch the right one this time, okay? So in this one, I've listed some of the professional skills noted from the previous 2 research sources. I'd like you to take a look at the list that's gonna be in the poll. And I'd like you to choose the one, this is gonna maybe be a little bit more thought, choose the one that you think is most essential, but most lacking in your coworkers or your employees. Okay, so I'm gonna not do that, and I'm gonna share again. Head on over here, escape from this. All right, and here's this one. See, look at how good I'm getting at this, friends. See how that goes? Okay, so 90102635. And the skills that I've listed are teamwork, problem solving, oral communication, written communication, time management, and adaptability. Which one would you say is most essential and most lacking in your organization? Very curious about this one. Woo, somebody comes in hot with time management. I love it. All right, there's 25 of you, so I'm expecting you all to respond. I'd like to get a few more here. I find this fascinating. Looking at my watch, 20 more seconds, menti.com. Chris put the link in the chat. Tap on there and head on in.
So Kelly, does this go along with you should hire for personality and train the skills, or that phrase where it's easier to train skills than it is for these soft skills?
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think the I think the thing is that it's hard. It's hard to, based on what the organization's hiring practices are, it's difficult to really judge how someone is going to perform once they get into the job, based on an interview. And I think the bottom line is that you try to hire people with great soft skills, or the skills that you need, but ultimately, it is my belief that you do need to train for these things after the fact. So yeah, okay. This is fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little something. So we did this whole thing, and I'm going to launch into this in a minute, but I will tell you that students here, based on a couple of pilot projects that we did, students here, in terms of the professional skills that they value the most, written communication is always the lowest. So students don't value super strong written communication skills, but they feel like that's the skill that they need to work the most on. So it's one that they feel like little sketchy on that, but I don't really value it all that much. So I think it's interesting that it's fairly low here on this scale, and that this time management and problem solving are pretty big, but also lacking. Wow. And maybe some of you didn't respond because you're like, my employees have all these things, which is like, ooh, that's awesome. Way to go. Okay, so I'm going to head on back in. Okay, so I think that one thing that you want to think about is, if you see a behavior that is really necessary, but it's not being demonstrated, you might consider why this disconnect is happening. Like, first, people need to understand why the behavior is so important. Like, what are the benefits of these critical aspects of professionalism, whichever one that you're trying to get at. And I'm going to leave that as a rhetorical question for now, because I want to dive into what we're doing at LSC regarding professionalism. And I am going to try to move through it fairly quickly, because this has been years worth of work that I want to sort of sum up. I might be biased, but I feel like the most fruitful ideas for professional growth come from our faculty. And lots of times I feel like those ideas happen from hallway conversations, or what's usually more likely in the pre-pandemic times, microwave conversations. So we're all like clustered around the microwave, heating up last night's meatloaf or whatever for lunch, and we're talking about stuff. And don't heat up meatloaf, it's like too stinky. Or don't heat up fish, sidebar, like don't do that. I did that one time, and I heard about it, tilapia, I think it was. I heard about it for days afterwards, probably as long as the smell lingered in the air. I don't think that they train for that in terms of professional behaviors, being careful, like microwave etiquette. They should though. Anyway, faculty were seeing students having these issues with what we might consider to be sort of common sense behaviors. Things like showing up on time for class, passing blame off on external factors when work wasn't done on time or not at all. It's the old, like, my dog ate my homework excuse. Like, we're seeing that a lot. And then poor netiquette. So in online classes, their netiquette wasn't great. And I'm going to give you a specific example of an email I received from a student. And of course, I removed the name for privacy, and this happened like 5 years ago. So I just want to share it with you. And this next slide is the email in its entirety. I received nothing else. This was the email. Okay, so you can see that this is not a professional communication. I'm not going to actually get down on this student though, and I'm going to explain the reasons why. But these are the sorts of things that we were seeing with more and more frequency. And I'm going to be hanging out on this slide here for a couple of minutes. So what happened next was a series of events that led to our professional fluency initiative that is alive and well on campus today. So it started in 2014 with these conversations, and then it sort of blossomed. And I don't know how new ideas happen in your organization regarding new initiatives, but I'm going to walk you through our process, and maybe you can consider the parallels at your organization. Okay, so every organization, I think, probably has within it what I would call finders and fixers. And these aren't terms that I coined, but I heard them a while back and I kind of like them. So finders are the ones who find the issues and they just kind of complain about them. And the fixers are the ones who actually do something about the problems, right? Or the issues that they come up with. And everybody could be a finder or a fixer, or maybe a finder and a fixer on the issue, whatever it is that they're interested in. So I decided that this professionalism thing, like, this is big. The faculty are really like revved up about it. Like, let's go. And so by virtue of the fact that I'm in this CFI position, which is fairly autonomous in the things that I do, I was like, I'm going to be the fixer. I'm going to fix this. And I mean, fix it, right? In quotes. So my first step was to get on the team that was drafting our new master academic plan. And that's a series of goals we pursue over a set number of years to come. So you probably have something similar to that in your organizations. So one of the top initiatives was professional fluency. So once that became a goal of our master academic plan, it becomes suddenly, magically, a campus-wide priority. And three things then happen fairly simultaneously. First, I started a task force to get professionalism addressed on our college-wide outcomes. So you can see that these are the skills that everyone who has an educational experience at LSC, they should leave with these skills. You can see what we came up with here on the right-hand side of the page. The personal responsibilities was already here, the self-development and lifelong learning, that and those two things were already there, but we added professional and then the top three bullet points. And so we came up with those to get them in the college-wide outcomes. And then we defined each one. So we had to have a very specific definition for what we mean for initiative and accountability. So now this is campus-wide, it's all over the place, cool. Then we went fishing out in the community, the Duluth Superior area, and we've invited a bunch of folks like you, maybe you were there, that would be amazing, who represented a variety of businesses, organizations, groups from the Duluth community. And we had lunch together at the silos. It was delicious. Do you remember doing that back in the day? I can't wait to meet again in person and have lunch. Like, I'm so excited. Anyway, we all came together to discuss in part soft skills and what are the community expectations. We told everybody, like, LSC we want to teach students what's going to be, what do you value most? What can we do? So we have folks who are leaving who can then come into your organizations and like you're hiring for the soft skills, and they have them. So you can see the results of our conversation, another word cloud, on the left-hand side. So it's interesting that professionalism itself is like huge. I was sort of defining that in the work ethic sort of way. And then the third thing was I personally interviewed over 24 faculty from all three of our academic divisions and staff members who work regularly with student workers. Like the director of our tutoring center, about what they expect from their students regarding professional behaviors in the class, what behaviors are most lacking, and ways besides role modeling professional behaviors. That's very important, because role modeling is the most common, sort of easiest thing to do. Like, people will just magically learn. Like, if I'm professional, people will just like soak that in and demonstrate it themselves, which, I mean, happens a little bit, but besides that, how do they really teach these skills to the students? And it was sort of interesting doing that, because most people were like, they weren't. And so that was kind of an eye-opening thing as well. So I took all of this information and I analyzed it. And I came up with the 4 most needed professional skills that we were going to focus our efforts on. Okay, here they are. So no surprise, I don't think. It's sort of interesting how these themes keep coming up over and over again. Our goal here is to teach these skills, not just be role models for them. So then the next step, lots of steps, we had to define how each one of these would look in the classroom. So pull together another task force to consider these definitions. And since we're teachers, we used a rubric that could be used for assessment, for grading. So here's an example of what that looked like. So this is a snapshot of the rubric for respect. I mean, you look at something like respect and it's very vague. Like, what does it mean, respect? It's one of those things where, well, I know it if I see it, you know, but that's not a really effective way of addressing this. Like, just be respectful. Like, nah, you got to be really specific about what that means in your context, because it means different things for different people in different contexts. So as you can see, we really focus the idea of respectfulness in how we talk to each other when we're in the classroom. And we had this at 3 different levels. Proficient, like you are super respectful and here's how you demonstrate this. This is acceptable and this is it needs improvement. And again, yeah, do you know this when you see this? Yes, but when it's down in writing and it's shown in these levels, it takes out that subjectivity, which can which doesn't get you closer to your professionalism goals that you want to get to. Okay, so from there, we launched into 2 pilot projects that asked faculty to who teach in the classroom, both in the classroom and online, to utilize this rubric. So here's the rubric, here's the definitions for our 4 different aspects of professionalism, and please teach these things. And they could utilize whatever teaching methodologies that they wanted to teach to help their students learn about the 4 aspects of professionalism that are context specific for their courses. So what I expect regarding professionalism for written communication will likely look different than somebody who teaches like in the electrician program. It's going to be a different skill set, right? There's just different needs. So we needed to, that was another thing, is that we needed to keep the rubric broad enough that it was applicable to all of those different courses, and we were able to do it. It was tough, but we were able to do it. And so here is just an example of what students thought that they still need to work on. And no surprises here. So these are online and on ground students and how they felt, what the things that they felt like they still needed to work on in terms of what they think about the initiative in general. They generally understood the value of the skills. Some students were resistant to it because they said, this is not a workplace. This is a college class. I want to be focused on children's literature or whatever. Like, I don't want to talk about written communication as a professional tool, you know, like, so there's that sort of, they weren't making, some students needed some help making the connection between like, yes, but this is a college course and there's lots of different things we're getting at here besides the hard subject that we're working on. Some students, I had a student brought this up in one of my classes, and I had a student say, really? You really need to like be doing this and talking about this stuff? Like, don't people know this? And I was like, yep, gotta talk about it, you know? So for some, it maybe was a little like, this seems sort of silly that we need to be talking about this, but you know, we do it anyway, because depending on the context, it might seem silly in my English class, like, oh, it's so obvious that we need to have professional written communication, but in another context, it still applies, you still need to do it, but it's just not as obvious. So Our goal was to have sort of this broad campus-wide initiative that we keep pushing forward. So we keep working on it. And obviously, you know, the pandemic has upended how much we're able to focus on it, but every fourth week of the semester is Professional Fluency Week. So that's when we really push it, and we continue to discuss the ways that we can embed it in our courses and the ways that we can instruct on it. We're also looking at new themes that we want to take on. We've been working on these for several years, and one that I'm really interested in looking at for this coming year is intercultural competency. And so that's something that I'm looking to add to teachers' awareness and then to bring forward to the students. So any questions so far or ideas?
One for you, Kelly.
What?
I have one for you. Do
good.
the teachers outline the type of material or the resources they expect students to bring to the table?
I guess I'm not sure. I guess I need a little bit more clarification on that type of.
Sure. So this was submitted by one of our guests. So we'll see if she wants to submit. But like how, I'm assuming she wants to know like how specific are the teachers and their expectations or the materials or what they're discussing.
Yeah, so I can give a few examples. Like, for example, timeliness. This is one that is so clear and concrete. Timeliness. You do your work on time. You show up on time, right? This is very specific and very sort of broadly applicable. So that's one that is just like either you're here or you're not. Not a lot of subjectivity. Something like, again, the oral or written communication is going to be subject specific. So if you're taking an online class, you're a student that's going to be taking an online class, you may find that the instructor will be very specific about the type of writing that they want to see in something like a discussion board. And this is where you post something and people comment and add ideas and kind of hopefully make a rich tapestry of learning. And one of the things they may say is like, we need you to use your college level writing. There's no texting shorthand. You must capitalize the first letters of each word. You need to use standard academic English. And, you know, they might get really specific like that. And some may say, you know, use your natural writing voices. It's okay. This is like more of a casual discussion. Don't worry so much about it. So that's something where they may, depending on what they're looking for, because some students get really locked up when they start thinking about grammar, and that might impede their ideas. And the teacher may say, grammar, like, do your best. Grammar stuff, though, not the end of the world here. If you want to get worked up about grammar, get worked up about it in your essays, but maybe not in this discussion board. So that can get a little bit more specific. The taking personal responsibility, that's one that's another vague one. And I was going to show you the rubric for that, but it's actually kind of long. There's some different segments to that. And that's going to be one where they're going to define, instructors will define what that means to a greater or lesser extent, again, depending on the subject. That's a pretty vague response, but it's what I've got so far. It's tough to nail down exactly how different instructors approach it because the subjects are so different. But I've had instructors who have given assignments about like for taking personal responsibility. A biology instructor has an assignment, a writing assignment, where students need to lay out, like, what is your study plan? What's your support system? What could be barriers to your success, and how would you plan on getting over those barriers? And then he asks, all right, come in and meet with me. And they do a 10-15 minute conference per student, which is that's a lot of time, but to talk over their success plan. And that's taking personal responsibility. So that's a huge thing, especially in like a hard science. They have a lot of content to cover, but there's that much value placed on it that this is tough. this is tough stuff. And what's your plan to make it happen? And let's really sort it out. So it depends on the instructor. I hope I got somewhere there. Okay. So I want to shift to how you might approach professionalism in your organizations. This sweeping landscape picture, it just needed like inspirational quotes. So I've given you two, and I like Yoda. So there you go. You gotta love Yoda. Okay, so in a few minutes, Chris, we're going to be heading into breakout rooms, okay? But I'm going to first give you a couple of tidbits on how we thought specifically about teaching these skills, the different things we were thinking about. And this might help you when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about, okay, how can we actually address this stuff? Okay, all right, so first, I think the two biggest questions that we had to ask were what are our expectations for professional behaviors? Yes, we detailed them in our rubric, but like I just said, each instructor is going to have more or less need for the different professionalism aspects. So that's the thing that I would say first is what in your organization, what are the critical aspects? And I would focus, if I were you, I wouldn't be like, here's 27 of them, go, like, whoa, like narrow it down, like 3 to 5 seems manageable for like a set period of time and give it a go and see what happens. Maybe even just one, maybe if you're just like, people, let's just like write a good email, like, cool, focus on that for 6 months and see what happens. But really narrow down what do you really need? And then also ask, well, I say, who are our students? Who are our employees? Who are our coworkers? What are their backgrounds and experiences? And how is that going to influence what they know about our expectations? So this is the consider your audience, like who's working for us and what are they bringing to the table? Obviously, we needed to get student buy-in. So we needed to figure out like, if we need like respectful interactions in our classrooms, we need it not just because it makes like my life easier as an instructor, if we can all be respectful, but my job is to convince students that this makes for a really great learning experience for everyone if we're all respectful in these particular ways. So defining those things. And students are also, and your folks, be great at coming up with these expectations themselves. Okay, so this comes into when you're all speaking the same language. So lots of times at the beginning of the semester, I'll ask students like, what's going to help you be successful in this class? Besides me, being awesome and like super engaging and like giving you everything you need to know. What kind of behaviors do we need to have here from each other in order to make this a really cool learning experience? And they come up with stuff and I'm just like, well, okay. And oftentimes they're a lot harder on themselves than I would be. They'd be like, if somebody's 2 minutes late, we lock the door, they can't come in. And I'm like, what? Like, no, but let's talk about timeliness, so having that conversation with the stakeholders, your employees or coworkers, like have that be a group effort. And then you can come up with the same language for things. So maybe you're not calling it professional written communication. Maybe it's like, okay, so when we email each other, this is what we're going to do. So you can come up with your own terms for these things. We also need to consider the idea of being proactive. So that's being upfront about this. So like telling students what's going on, like we're talking professionalism here. This is going to be a part of the class. So it's not some like mystery or like big surprise that it's going to rear up partway through the semester, like some sort of bad indigestion after a great meal or something. It's like, whoa, where's this coming from? Like, no, like bring it up early and bring it up often. And that's the difference, proactive versus being reactive, which is, of course, is the consequences that somebody might face if they're not being respectful, for example, how that might affect a grade. And then finally, of course, we have to be honest about our own professionalism so we can be positive role models. Okay, so that's some food for thought. Now, here we go, friends, breakout rooms. Okay, so how this is gonna work is I'm gonna put you in a room and I'd like you to address this particular question. Okay, I'm gonna move your faces out of the way so I can see it. Okay, how do employees or coworkers know what the expectations are regarding their professionalism? Like, you're an employee, like, how did you know what the expectations are in your organization? We're gonna take 5 minutes and there is going to be a leader who's gonna emerge, okay? And the leader is the one who talks first, okay? So leader, I'd like you to keep track of the old clock on the wall. We're at 12:45, so at 12:50, Chris is gonna yank you out of the breakout room and we're gonna get a couple of ideas on this, okay? So Chris, you ready to go with the breakout rooms?
I'm ready.
Okay, fantastic. So y'all go talk about this question for a few minutes. 5, go.
All right. It looks like we're all back.
Okay, perfect. So let's hear a couple of ideas. I got my eagle eyes on the clock, but I'd like to hear a few ideas. How do people know what the expectations are?
Well, I'll start. Our group talked about handbooks are nice, and I came from education, so there were always student handbooks. There were faculty and staff handbooks. Everybody knew what they were supposed to wear, how they were supposed to, show up, and all those good things. But then we also talked about there's always that assumption that people know, and to move from that to maybe talking to managers or whoever people are reporting to regularly to check in on expectations to make sure they're clear. Because one of the things that we brought up is sometimes, observing the culture is how you learn them, but that has a few drawbacks.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes you think you're getting positive, I don't know, like you look around and you can get some negative behaviors sometimes from folks. Yeah. Who else? Let's hear just one more.
I'll go.
Thank you.
I had a great group of women who we actually needed more time because the conversation was good. But overall, I believe it started with new hire orientation. And Diana had a great comment of continuing to train forward. So it's not just a one and you're done. And then the one-on-ones, the manager conversations with team members that are fluent and consistent.
Perfect. Yeah, that one-on-one and is really important. Yeah, making good use of employee reviews, those sorts of things. Absolutely. Very good. All right, excellent ideas. All right. Thank you. So I want to get back to earlier. I showed you that email from that student. I want to show it again because it illustrates an important point. So understanding the factors that individuals bring to the workplace that influence how they act. Okay, so this is the email again. Obviously, less than impressed with the subject line. I wanted to see a little bit more attention to a salutation and a signature line, some more content generally. But I was just sort of taken aback, and I was like, "This is no." But then I was like, I got really curious. I'm like, how did this come to be? So I asked her. I'm like, why this exactly? Not so many words, but and when I asked, she kind of laughed, like she knew that the subject line was not like she knew that the subject line was not great. But she also told me something really important. Friends, she had never initiated an email before. I was like, you've never written an email before? She said, well, I've responded to emails. Like people send an email and I've responded, but I've never actually initiated one. And I was like, it didn't even occur to me that that would be a thing that someone wouldn't have had an experience with until college. But here it is, right? And this is the world we live in. As technology grows, it becomes more and more critical that the things that we might take for granted, can't do that anymore, even the most basic things. And so it has totally influenced how I talk to students about email. And for some, it's totally pedantic and they're like, obviously we know this, Kelly. But for others, it's like, okay, now I know this, I can carry this forward. Because email is not often a part of their skill set, actually. So we have to consider our audience. This is from the LinkedIn Global Talent Trends Report for 2020. And it notes that what they're calling employee experience is becoming more and more important in the workplace. So employee experience points to what employees think and how they feel about where they work. And enhancing that experience will lead to a more successful business. So instead of us thinking, if we're bosses, thinking, I need to find employees who will toe the line. It's a little more about like, I want to bring in employees and have them have a positive experience here. That doesn't mean I don't think like catering to all the whims of whatever anybody wants, but it is about considering these four things: the people, place, product, and process. So like, what are the relationships among people? Where are they working? What does the physical space look like? The work itself, how stimulating it is, and then what are the rules and norms for how work gets done and is rewarded, which is what we're talking about here. We're getting low on time, so we are not going to break out into the groups. But I'm wondering, how does your organization purposely teach the professional skills you value most? And you've probably addressed some of these ideas already in your groups. You might consider if, in fact, if we've been thinking about these skills and you've noticed that, gosh, there are a few here that are kind of coming up that employees are not handling as well as I'm expecting them to. We have the handbook, we have the one-on-ones, we do the continuous training, but there's still some things that are happening here. What's up with that? It's probably time to start thinking about, all right, how are we going to make this more effective? And looking at those employees, using some of the things I've talked about already, like looking at the ones who are doing it really well, asking them, how is this happening? Like, how are you doing this well? Which is, I think, a question that we do not ask enough of the people who demonstrate these skills. How do you do this well? And how can we then apply your lessons into what we can then move forward with some new training ideas and plans for our employees, and then getting everybody involved in like, this is a thing, like, we'd like to see more of this. How can we do that? So not making it like a hammer, but thinking more about it being a conversation. And then I think another important thing is the pandemic and of how that's changed our ideas about what we need for specific skills. I think the huge obvious example is the working from home, and how like it was not a big deal for us at LSC. A lot of us teach online, but I know for a lot of people, it was like having people work from home was like a huge thing. And did it work out? Maybe, probably. You're here still, so I think that's probably promising. But that's a huge example. But how has the pandemic changed what we expect from our employees? And then I think finally, keeping in mind the clock, I just want to offer a call from action. So there's this slide from earlier. The competency gaps of teamwork, critical thinking, oral written communication, and then work ethic or professionalism. How are we addressing these skills? Ultimately, to ensure the professional fluency, consider first on the list here, defining what the expectations are clearly, and even in collaboration with your coworkers and employees. Identify the possible gaps in understanding based on the lived experiences people are coming into the workplace with, and communicating what you all need and the value of those behaviors for everyone. And then celebrate the wins. Yes, when things are going well, like give the high fives. And then, of course, friends, act these skills yourselves. If they're important, you need to live it yourselves. So I would say thank you. We can do this. Let's do it. LSC, we're doing our part here, trying to make our folks as professionally fluent as we can. And let me know, like, if I get really fired up about this and pretty excited to talk about it. If you want to talk more, I would love to have more conversation. Here's my phone number. Here's my extremely long email. Sorry about that. It is what it is. But I would love, get in touch, love to talk more. And I just want to thank you so much again for the privilege of your time to be able to talk with you about this. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so much. It is 1 o'clock, so if you need to go, please feel free to step off. Otherwise, you know, if you have any questions, I will be here for another minute or so. And like Kelly said, information is on the slide, and I'm happy to email it to you as well if you need to contact Kelly thereafter. So thank you for joining us. And Kelly, thank you so much for presenting. That was fantastic.
Thank you. I'll hang out for a minute too, in case anybody has anything they want to say, but it's a pleasure, really. Thank you.
All right.